He thought humiliating his pregnant ex would be the perfect revenge. But when she announced the twins' real father during her performance, his bride ran out in tears. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The snow fell relentlessly over the Bronx, painting the gritty landscape in deceptive purity. Inside her small apartment, Desiree Williams paced nervously, rearranging the same pillow for the 5th time. Her trembling fingers clutched a plastic stick with 2 pink lines, the 5th test she'd taken, all showing the same result. At 22, this wasn't part of her plan. She glanced at her phone. 8:45 p.m. Maxwell would arrive soon. He always came late on Thursdays after his business dinners that she'd never been invited to attend. Desiree moved to the window, watching snowflakes dance in the harsh glow of street lights, her reflection ghostly against the glass. For a brief moment, her mind drifted to their first meeting at the luxury boutique where she worked on 5th Avenue. Maxwell Thornton had walked in looking for a gift for his mother. At least that's what he'd claimed. 3 hours later, they were having coffee, his charisma pulling her into his orbit despite her better judgment. A month later, they were lovers. A secret relationship that had stretched to a year now, always on his terms, always in the shadows. "It's just that my family is complicated," he'd explained whenever she asked why she hadn't met them. "The Thornton name comes with expectations." The sound of a key in the lock yanked her from her memories. Desiree straightened her simple black dress, one of the few designer pieces she owned, a heavily discounted sample from the boutique, and took a deep breath. Maxwell Thornton entered with a burst of cold air, shaking snow from his Burberry coat. At 29, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had never heard the word no. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the weather, his custom suit immaculate beneath the expensive coat. "It's brutal out there," he said, loosening his tie. "Traffic was a nightmare. Some idiot tried to challenge my driver for a parking spot, as if a Honda Civic deserves the same space as a Mercedes." He laughed, the sound warming the small apartment. Desiree didn't join in. Her hands were clenched so tightly together that her knuckles had gone white. "We need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly as he hung his coat. "That sounds ominous. Let me pour a drink first. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Maxwell froze, his hand suspended midway to the bottle of Macallan he'd brought weeks ago. Slowly, he turned to face her. "You're what?" His voice was dangerously quiet. Desiree swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant. 4 months along, actually. I've been to the doctor. It's twins." The change in his expression was instantaneous and chilling. The warm smile vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating that she'd never seen before. His eyes narrowed as they swept over her still slim figure. "Are you sure they're mine?" The words cut through the air like ice shards. Desiree stepped back as though he'd slapped her. "How can you ask me that? You know I've only been with you." Maxwell's laugh was nothing like the warm sound from moments before. It was hollow, devoid of humor, echoing in the small apartment like a mockery. "Don't be naive, Desiree. This wasn't in my plans." He moved to the window, looking out at the city as though seeking escape routes. "It wasn't in mine either," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But we're in this together, right?" When he turned back, his face was a mask of cool detachment. "Together?" He gestured around the modest apartment. "You really think this would work? A black girl from Harlem pregnant with twins?" His eyes were merciless. "You don't fit in my world of Wall Street and Hamptons parties." Desiree felt something break inside her. "Your world? I thought we were building something together." Maxwell spotted the ultrasound image on the coffee table. He picked it up, studied it briefly with clinical detachment, then tossed it back down carelessly. "Twins. Fascinating." His tone suggested they were discussing a mildly interesting scientific phenomenon, not his unborn children. "But I love you," Desiree whispered, hating how pathetic the words sounded even as they left her lips. "Love?" Maxwell's laugh was sharper this time. "You're a mistake, Desiree. A burden I should never have carried. My family would never accept someone like you, let alone bastards that might threaten our lineage." Each word was a precise incision, surgical in its cruelty. Desiree sank onto the couch, one hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "You don't mean that," she said, though the conviction in his eyes told her otherwise. Maxwell began moving around the apartment, collecting the few possessions he'd left there over the past year: a spare tie, cufflinks, an expensive watch. "I've been meaning to have this conversation anyway," he continued, his voice eerily calm. "You're not enough, Desiree. Frankly, you're boring. I needed a distraction while Melissa was in Europe. Now she's back, and we're getting married in June." The room seemed to tilt beneath her. "Melissa? You're engaged?" "Melissa Cambridge. Her father owns Cambridge Cosmetics." He said it as though she should recognize the significance. "The arrangement has been in place for years. The European trip was her final fling before settling down." "And I was yours," Desiree said numbly. Maxwell didn't bother denying it. He checked his watch, platinum, worth more than 6 months of her rent. "I need to go. Melissa's waiting at Per Se. I told her I had a late meeting." He reached into his jacket and removed an envelope, tossing it onto the coffee table next to the ultrasound. "There's $5,000 in there. Take care of the problem or don't. The choice is yours. But don't contact me again." Desiree stared at the envelope, then at him. $5,000? That's what our children are worth to you? Maxwell adjusted his tie, already mentally departed. "Consider it severance pay. We had fun, but playtime's over." He retrieved his coat. "I've already called my lawyer. If you try to claim these children are mine, you'll face a legal battle you can't afford. And if by some miracle you proved paternity, the trust fund stipulations would ensure they never see a penny." The clinical precision of his planning made her stomach turn. This wasn't an impulsive reaction. He'd prepared for this possibility. "You've thought this through," she said quietly. "I'm a Thornton. We plan for all contingencies." He paused at the door. "You should know. Your position at the boutique may become untenable. The owner is a family friend." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing with decisive finality behind him. Desiree sat motionless, clutching her stomach, the ultrasound image of her babies, their perfect little profiles visible in grainy black and white, lying discarded on the table. Through the window, she watched Maxwell enter his waiting Mercedes, never looking back as it pulled away into the swirling snow. It was only then that she allowed herself to break, sobs tearing from her throat as she slid from the couch to the floor, curled around her unborn children like a wounded animal. The week that followed passed in a nightmarish blur. True to Maxwell's word, she received termination papers from the boutique. Failure to represent the brand image appropriately was the official reason. Her phone calls went unanswered, her emails returned. It was as though an invisible wall had descended, cutting her off from her former life. When she attempted to apply for assistance, she encountered bureaucratic obstacles at every turn. Forms mysteriously lost, appointments rescheduled, then cancelled. The Thornton influence stretched farther than she'd imagined. By February, she was sleeping in temporary shelters, lining up for free meals while desperately searching for employment. Her resume, once impressive with the Fifth Avenue boutique as her reference, now met with polite rejections or, more often, silence. In the waiting rooms of government offices and clinics, she would see them in magazines, Maxwell and Melissa Cambridge, glittering at charity galas and society events. "Manhattan's golden couple," one caption read, describing their June wedding as the social event of the season. The worst day came in late February. After waiting 4 hours at an employment agency, she was told no positions were available for her in her condition. Walking out into the bitter cold, skipping lunch to save her last few dollars, Desiree felt hope slipping away. "You look like you could use some food, honey," a voice called from the doorway of a modest restaurant. A middle-aged Puerto Rican woman stood there, arms folded against the cold. "I'm Rosa. I own this place, and I need a waitress. The last one quit yesterday." Desiree hesitated. "I'm pregnant, with twins." Rosa's eyes softened as they took in Desiree's situation. "I can see that. Due in what, May?" "June." "Well, June is still months away. I need help now." She held the door open wider. "I don't care that you're pregnant, Carita. Everyone deserves a chance." That night, serving tables at Rosa's modest Queens restaurant, Desiree found herself smiling for the first time in weeks. The work was exhausting, but Rosa's kindness and the simple dignity of earning money again restored something she hadn't realized was missing. After closing, counting her modest tips, Desiree confessed her fears to Rosa. "I don't know how I'll do this," she admitted, hand resting on her growing belly. "But I'll prove him wrong. About everything." When June arrived, bringing oppressive heat to the city, Desiree's waters broke during the dinner rush. Rosa closed the restaurant immediately, driving her to the hospital in her ancient Buick. Jaden arrived first, followed 7 minutes later by his sister Zora, both with powerful lungs and their father's unmistakable features. That same weekend, the society pages exploded with coverage of the Thornton-Cambridge wedding at the Hamptons estate. While Desiree nursed her newborns in the makeshift nursery Rosa had prepared in the restaurant's back room, Maxwell was honeymooning on a private island in the Caribbean. Cradling her babies in the small hours of the morning, Desiree made a promise over their improvised cribs. "One day, you'll have everything you deserve, and he'll see exactly what he walked away from." As she fell asleep with her newborns beside her, Desiree couldn't imagine that 15 years later she would be coordinating Maxwell's wedding with a business empire 3 times the size of his own. The morning after making her promise to the twins, Desiree awoke to the sound of their hungry cries. Her body ached from childbirth, but there was no time for recovery. Babies needed to be fed, rent needed to be paid, and life refused to pause for her pain. "Good morning, my little fighters," she whispered, lifting Jaden first, then Zora, to nurse them in the makeshift bedroom Rosa had created from the restaurant's storage space. A small window let in the summer sunshine, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. The space was humble: a twin bed, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and 2 wooden crates padded with blankets serving as cribs. But it was safe. 3 weeks later, Desiree stood behind the boutique's gleaming glass doors on Fifth Avenue, staring at the place that had once been her workplace. She'd dressed carefully in her best remaining outfit, a navy dress she'd altered to fit her post-pregnancy body, and had practiced her speech all morning. Perhaps they would reconsider. Perhaps the manager would remember her sales record, her punctuality, her rapport with clients. "I'm sorry, but you need to leave." The security guard appeared before she could even touch the handle. "Management has instructed that you're not permitted on the premises." "I just want to speak with Vivian," Desiree said, referring to the manager who had once praised her as the store's rising star. "Ms. Lawrence is unavailable." His expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm just doing my job. Please don't make this difficult." As Desiree turned away, she caught a glimpse of Vivienne watching from behind a display, quickly averting her eyes when their gazes met. The message was clear: she had been erased. Back at the unemployment office, Desiree sat with Jaden and Zora sleeping in a second-hand double stroller. The waiting room was stifling, the ancient fan merely circulating hot air. A discarded magazine on the chair beside her featured a spread on "Summer's Most Glamorous Couples." Maxwell and Melissa beamed from the glossy page, champagne flutes raised at some Hamptons charity event. "Williams?" The clerk's voice pulled her from her trance. 20 minutes later, she emerged with another denial. "Inconsistencies in your application," they claimed. The same excuse as last week and the week before. No amount of documentation seemed to correct these mysterious inconsistencies. That evening, as she served tables at Rosa's restaurant, her feet swollen, breasts aching with milk, a customer complained about her slow service. "I'm sorry," Desiree apologized, balancing plates on her arm while mentally calculating how many more hours until she could check on the twins in the back room. "You should be," the woman snapped. "If you can't handle the job, maybe you shouldn't be working." Desiree bit back tears, nodding silently as she set down the plates. In the kitchen, Rosa found her trying to compose herself. "That woman out there? She's nobody," Rosa said firmly, wiping a tear from Desiree's cheek. "But you're raising 2 babies alone and still standing. That makes you somebody." 2 days later, the final blow came. Desiree returned from grocery shopping, calculating each penny, buying only essentials, to find an eviction notice taped to her apartment door. "You're 2 months behind," her landlord said when she called, pleading. "I've got a business to run, not a charity. I can pay half now and then, not good enough. You have 48 hours. That night, after her shift, Desiree packed her life into 2 suitcases. Clothes, diapers, the twins' few toys, and the ultrasound image, now carefully laminated to preserve it. She looked around the small apartment one last time, remembering how proud she'd been to sign the lease just 18 months ago. How she'd dreamed of filling it with music, maybe upgrading to a larger place once her singing career took off. "This isn't the end," she told herself firmly. "Just a different beginning." Rosa offered her the storage room indefinitely, but pride made Desiree insist on paying rent. "I'll work extra shifts," she promised. "I can handle it." But the truth was, she could barely handle the present arrangement. The twins were colicky, taking turns crying through the night. Tips were inconsistent, and every penny went to formula, diapers, and the room's modest rent. There was nothing left to save, nothing to build upon. One night, after a particularly brutal shift with rude customers and meager tips, Desiree found herself sitting on a park bench, the twins finally asleep in their stroller. It was past midnight, dangerous to be out alone, but she couldn't face the small room just yet. She needed air, space to think. A police officer approached, flashlight beam scanning her face. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here. The park closed at 10. "I'm not sleeping," Desiree said quickly. "Just sitting." His light moved to the stroller, revealing the sleeping infants. His expression softened slightly. "You have somewhere to go?" She nodded, though the room behind Rosa's restaurant felt less like somewhere and more like nowhere. "Then I suggest you go there. This neighborhood isn't safe after dark." As Desiree pushed the stroller through the quiet streets, a magazine in a closed newsstand caught her eye. Maxwell again, this time cutting a ribbon at a new Thornton Hotel opening. The headline read, "Expansion Continues. Thornton Empire Grows Under Heir's Leadership." Anger surged through her veins, hot and clarifying. While she was counting pennies for diapers, he was cutting ribbons and drinking champagne, having erased her and their children from his pristine narrative. The next morning, she was first in line at the public library when it opened. While the twins slept in their stroller, she used the free computers to search for job listings, housing assistance, educational opportunities, anything that might offer a path forward. "Excuse me," a woman's voice interrupted her search. "Are those your babies?" Desiree tensed, instinctively preparing for judgment. "Yes." "They're beautiful." The woman smiled. "I'm Laura, the librarian. I see you here most mornings now." "I'm Desiree. I'm looking for opportunities." Laura glanced at her screen. "Have you considered education? There are scholarships for single mothers." "I don't have time for school. I need money now." "Sometimes investing in the future is the only way out of the present," Laura said gently, sliding a pamphlet toward her. "This community college has night classes and childcare assistance." Desiree took the pamphlet, doubt written across her face. "Just think about it," Laura urged. "You strike me as someone determined to change her circumstances." 3 weeks later, Desiree found herself at an employment agency in Queens, different from the one that had repeatedly rejected her. The twins were fussy, drawing irritated glances from other applicants. "Shh, please," she whispered, rocking the stroller while reviewing her carefully revised resume. She'd removed the boutique, knowing that reference would only lead to rejection, and emphasized her customer service experience at Rosa's. "You with the babies," the receptionist called. "You're next." As Desiree stood, gathering the diaper bag and stroller, an older Puerto Rican woman sitting nearby spoke up. "They're hungry," she said, nodding at the twins. "I raised 5. I know that cry." Desiree sighed. "I know. I'll feed them after the interview." The woman studied her for a moment. "I'm Rosa Diaz. I own a restaurant on Junction Boulevard. My waitress quit yesterday, and I need someone who can start immediately." Desiree blinked in surprise. "I'm a waitress at Café Azul in Manhattan." "Why come all the way to Queens for job hunting then?" Desiree hesitated. "I need a change, and I live in Queens now." Rosa's eyes were kind but assessing. "I pay minimum wage plus tips. Hours are 10 to 10, 6 days a week. It's hard work. I'm not afraid of hard work." "And the babies?" Desiree straightened her shoulders. "They come with me. I can work while they sleep and—" "There's a small room in the back," Rosa interrupted. "My son used it before he moved to Florida. It has a private bathroom. You can stay there with the babies if you need to." Tears pricked Desiree's eyes. After weeks of closed doors and averted gazes, this stranger's matter-of-fact offer of help seemed almost surreal. "I don't care that you're pregnant, Carita," Rosa continued, then smiled at her mistake. "Well, obviously you're not pregnant anymore. But I mean, I don't care that you have babies. Everyone needs a chance." The following months established a grueling routine. Desiree would wake at 5 with the twins, feed and change them, then prepare for the restaurant's opening. During slow periods, she'd study business management materials from the library, taking notes in a worn spiral notebook. When the twins napped, she'd clean the restaurant. When they were awake, she'd wear Zora in a sling while keeping Jaden in a bassinet near the kitchen. The customers, mostly working-class locals, grew accustomed to the arrangement. Some even brought small gifts for the babies: hand-knit booties, gently used toys, the occasional package of diapers. For the first time since Maxwell's betrayal, Desiree felt part of a community, however modest. One evening, after a particularly busy dinner service, Rosa found Desiree counting her tips at the counter, carefully separating the money into different envelopes. "What's this system?" Rosa asked. "This is for rent," Desiree explained, pointing to the largest envelope. "This is for diapers and formula. This is for emergencies. And this," she held up the smallest envelope containing just $3, "is savings." Rosa nodded approvingly. "You're smart with money. That's good." "I have to be." Desiree sealed the envelopes. "I don't know how I'll do this," she confessed, glancing toward the back room where the twins slept. "But I'll prove him wrong. About everything." "Him?" Rosa raised an eyebrow. Desiree hesitated, then shared her story: the whirlwind romance, the cruel abandonment, the systematic closing of doors afterward. She spoke of Maxwell's cutting words, his dismissal of her as not enough, as boring, as someone who didn't fit in his world. Rosa listened silently, her expression darkening. When Desiree finished, the older woman took her hands firmly. "That man didn't just abandon you, Carita. He abandoned himself, his integrity, his responsibility, his humanity. But you? You keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other." She glanced toward the back room. "Those babies don't know it yet, but they hit the lottery with you as their mother." That night, as Desiree nursed the twins in the small room that had become their home, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, not one of mere survival, but of triumph. A future where her children would have opportunities, security, and pride in their mother's achievements. Counting the $3 in her savings envelope, Desiree didn't know that she was taking the first step toward a financial empire that would one day make Maxwell Thornton beg for her attention. The rain poured relentlessly on that June evening, as if the heavens themselves were announcing the arrival of Desiree's twins. Each contraction came faster than the last, her knuckles white as she gripped Rosa's hand in the back of the taxi speeding toward Queen's General Hospital. "Respira, querida," Rosa coached, her voice steady despite the panic in her eyes. "The babies are coming, but you are stronger." Desiree nodded through gritted teeth, her mind flashing bizarrely to a magazine cover she'd seen that morning. Maxwell and Melissa's wedding featured prominently, their ceremony scheduled for this very weekend at the Thornton estate in the Hamptons. While she fought through labor pains in a taxi that smelled of cigarettes and pine air freshener, Maxwell would be sipping champagne under white tents, celebrating his perfect union with his socially acceptable bride. The hospital's fluorescent lights were harsh against her sweat-dampened skin as nurses rushed her into the delivery room. "Where's the father?" one asked mechanically, clipboard poised. "Not coming," Desiree managed between contractions. "Just her. She's my person." Rosa squeezed her hand in silent solidarity as the doctor announced Desiree was fully dilated. What followed was a blur of pain, determination, and finally, miraculously, the sharp, indignant cry of her firstborn. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, holding up the tiny, wrinkled infant before placing him briefly on Desiree's chest. She barely had time to register his perfect face before another contraction seized her. 7 minutes later, Zora entered the world, her cries even more insistent than her brother's. "They're fighters," Rosa whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, "just like their mama." Hours later, exhausted but unable to sleep, Desiree cradled both babies in the narrow hospital bed. Their features were unmistakable. Maxwell's aristocratic nose, his defined jawline already hinted at in their tiny faces. But their eyes, when briefly open, held her determination. "You are perfect," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You are not a mistake. You are not a burden. You are my strength." She traced their tiny fingers, counting each one, marveling at the miracle she'd created despite everything stacked against her. "Your father said we wouldn't fit in his world," she told them softly, "so we'll build our own." 3 days later, Desiree settled into the back room at Rosa's restaurant with the twins. The space felt palatial compared to the hospital room, a real bed, a makeshift changing table fashioned from an old dresser, and 2 sturdy wooden crates padded with soft blankets that Rosa had prepared as cribs. "My son slept in a drawer when he was born," Rosa had explained pragmatically. "These babies have luxury accommodations in comparison." That first week passed in a haze of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and healing from childbirth. Rosa had arranged for her niece to cover Desiree's shifts, insisting she take at least 2 weeks to recover. "The restaurant survived before you," she'd said firmly. "It will survive 2 weeks without you." On the twins' 1-week birthday, Rosa arrived with a newspaper and a troubled expression. "You don't need to see this," she said, hesitating at the door. "But I thought perhaps you should." The society section featured a 2-page spread of the Thornton-Cambridge wedding. Melissa looked radiant in a custom Vera Wang gown, her blonde hair arranged in an elegant updo beneath a cathedral-length veil. Beside her, Maxwell beamed in a bespoke tuxedo, champagne flute raised in a toast to forever. Desiree's eyes lingered on his face, the face she'd once believed held genuine affection for her, the same face that had coldly dismissed her and their children as mistakes. The article described the 500-guest celebration as the wedding of the year, noting that the couple would honeymoon on a private island in the Caribbean before returning to their newly renovated Upper East Side penthouse. Something hardened inside Desiree as she read those words. While she fought to keep her newborns fed and housed while she recovered from bringing his children into the world, Maxwell was drinking champagne on a beach, having thoroughly erased her from his narrative. "Thank you," she said quietly, handing the paper back to Rosa. "I needed to see that." "Why?" Rosa asked, genuinely confused. "Why hurt yourself this way?" "Because it reminds me what I'm fighting against," Desiree replied, looking down at the sleeping twins. Not him specifically, but a world that makes it so easy for men like him to walk away, while women like me have to fight for every inch of ground. 2 weeks later, Desiree returned to work with a new fire in her eyes. She'd established a system. The twins remained in the back room, monitored by a baby monitor Rosa had purchased. During slow periods, Desiree would check on them, feed them, change them. During busy times, Rosa herself would often peek in, humming Spanish lullabies when they fussed. Customers grew accustomed to seeing Desiree emerge from the back room with a baby on her hip, or later, wearing Zora in a sling while she took orders. Rather than complaint, most responded with empathy. Regular patrons began bringing small gifts, hand-knitted booties, gently used onesies, occasionally even packages of diapers. "The community takes care of its own," Rosa explained when Desiree expressed surprise at the kindness. "Not like those fancy Manhattan people who step over the homeless on their way to charity galas." As the twins reached 3 months, Desiree established a grueling but sustainable routine. She woke at 5 each morning, feeding and changing the babies before preparing for the restaurant's opening. Between serving tables, she studied business management books from the library, free online courses accessed through the restaurant's ancient computer, marketing strategies gleaned from outdated textbooks. "Why business?" Rosa asked one evening, finding Desiree hunched over a thick volume titled Fundamentals of Small Business Management, Jaden sleeping in her lap while Zora dozed in her crib. "Because I need to understand how money works," Desiree replied without looking up. "How it flows, how it grows, how it can work for you instead of you always working for it." Rosa nodded approvingly. "Smart girl. My husband, God rest his soul, he worked hard his whole life but never understood this. He made money, but money never made him anything in return." When the twins reached 6 months, the restaurant faced a difficult period. Winter had arrived, bringing bitter cold that kept many regular customers home. Weeknight dinners were particularly slow, with Desiree sometimes serving only 3 or 4 tables during her entire shift. "We need more customers," she told Rosa one night as they cleaned up after another disappointing evening. "It's always slow in winter," Rosa shrugged resignedly. "People don't want to go out in the cold." Desiree frowned thoughtfully, bouncing Jaden on her hip. "They might, if they had a good reason. What if we offered something special? Something they couldn't get at home?" "Like what?" "Our food is already the best in the neighborhood," Rosa said proudly. "What about music?" Desiree suggested. "Live entertainment. Something to make weeknights feel special." Rosa looked skeptical. "Musicians cost money." "I can sing," Desiree said quietly. "I used to, before." She didn't need to explain before what. Before Maxwell. Before her world imploded. Before she became someone whose dreams had narrowed to simple survival. Rosa's eyes widened. "You never mentioned this. It never seemed relevant. But I was good. I performed at a few venues in Manhattan before I met him. He actually saw me perform once, before we officially met at the boutique." "Then it's settled," Rosa declared. "This Friday you sing. I'll put signs in the window. My nephew Miguel plays guitar. He can accompany you." That Friday, Desiree found herself standing in the small cleared space at the front of the restaurant, wearing her one decent dress, a simple black number she'd altered to fit her post-pregnancy body. The restaurant was surprisingly full, curious locals drawn by the handmade signs promising "Live Music Friday." Her hands trembled slightly as Miguel strummed the opening chords to "At Last." It had been over a year since she'd performed publicly, and so much had changed. She was no longer the hopeful young woman with stars in her eyes, but a mother with responsibilities that weighed heavily on her shoulders. When she opened her mouth to sing, however, something unexpected happened. The weight seemed to lift momentarily. Her voice, unused for so long, emerged rich and full, filling the small restaurant with emotion that transcended the humble setting. For those few minutes, she wasn't a struggling single mother or an abandoned lover. She was simply a woman with a gift, sharing it unabashedly. The applause when she finished was thunderous by the restaurant's standards. Rosa wiped tears from her eyes, and even stoic Miguel looked impressed. But most importantly, the customers were enraptured, ordering additional drinks, lingering over desserts, and leaving generous tips. "You've been hiding this gift?" Rosa demanded afterward, counting the night's receipts. "Girl, we made triple our usual Friday night earnings." Desiree smiled, the first genuine smile in months. "I wasn't hiding it. I just forgot it was there." The Friday night performances became a weekly tradition. Desiree expanded her repertoire, and Miguel invited musician friends to join occasionally, creating a rotating lineup of local talent. Word spread, and soon the restaurant was packed every Friday, with customers spilling onto the sidewalk during warmer evenings. As Desiree counted the tips from the third successful music night, separating them into her now familiar envelopes, she realized the savings envelope held $15 instead of the usual $3 or $4. It wasn't much by most standards, but to her, it represented something profound, the beginning of possibility. "You know," Rosa said thoughtfully, watching her organize the money, "you could do this elsewhere too. Other restaurants would pay for entertainment like this." Desiree looked up, an idea forming. Not just the singing, the whole concept, connecting local talent with venues that need customers. "There's no service doing that in this neighborhood." Rosa nodded encouragingly. "So start one." That night, nursing the twins before bed, Desiree allowed herself to dream bigger than mere survival for the first time since their birth. She envisioned not just singing at other venues, but creating a network, musicians, small businesses, mutually beneficial arrangements that would lift everyone involved. "Your father said I was boring," she whispered to the drowsy infants. "Let's show him just how exciting we can be." Counting the $15 in her savings envelope, Desiree didn't know she was taking the first step toward a financial empire that would one day make Maxwell Thornton beg for her attention. 3 years passed like a whirlwind. The Friday night performances at Rosa's restaurant had evolved from a desperate attempt to increase business into a neighborhood institution. What began as Desiree singing solo with Miguel's guitar accompaniment had blossomed into a rotating showcase of local talent: jazz quartets, spoken word artists, classical guitarists, and soul singers who filled the modest venue to capacity every weekend. Desiree stood behind the restaurant's small counter, clipboard in hand, training a new waitress on the register. Her appearance had changed subtly but significantly since those early days of desperation. The haunted look in her eyes had been replaced by focused determination. Her clothes, while still modest, were carefully selected and well-maintained. Most notably, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had faced the worst and survived. "The music nights have different menu pricing," she explained to the nervous young woman. "Make sure you give customers these special menus on Fridays and Saturdays." From the corner table, 3-year-old Jaden and Zora watched with solemn attention, coloring in books Rosa had bought them. They were unusually well-behaved for toddlers, as if somehow understanding their mother couldn't afford the luxury of their misbehavior. "Mama, look!" Zora held up her drawing, a riot of colors that vaguely resembled the restaurant. "Beautiful, baby." Desiree smiled, her face softening as it always did when she looked at her children. "Just 5 more minutes of work, then we'll go home." Home was no longer the storage room behind the restaurant. 6 months earlier, Desiree had scraped together enough for a security deposit on a small 1-bedroom apartment 5 blocks away. The twins shared the bedroom while she slept on a pull-out couch in the living area, an arrangement that felt luxurious after years of making do in Rosa's back room. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron as she surveyed the restaurant. What had once been a struggling neighborhood eatery now bustled with energy. The walls, once bare, displayed local artwork available for purchase. The tables, once wobbly, had been replaced with sturdier versions. Even the lighting had been upgraded, creating a warm ambiance that encouraged customers to linger. "You have transformed my little restaurant," Rosa said, watching Desiree finish the training session. "Imagine what you will do with your own business." Desiree smiled, but her eyes revealed the weight of her ambition. "I'm working on it. The music nights are just the beginning." Later that evening, after tucking the twins into their shared bed, Desiree spread her papers across the small kitchen table. Flyers, handwritten budgets, and business plans covered the surface, the foundation of what she hoped would become Starlight Events, her own entertainment coordination service. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Cafe Luna wants similar music set up to Rosa's. Owner asked for your number." Desiree smiled. Word was spreading. What had begun as a desperate measure to attract customers to Rosa's had evolved into a neighborhood-wide phenomenon. She now coordinated musicians for 3 local restaurants, matching talent to venues and taking a small commission from both parties. The following morning found Desiree at the public library, the twins occupied with picture books while she researched how to officially register a business. The librarian, now familiar with her regular visits, slid a flyer across the desk. "Thought you might be interested," she said quietly. "The Small Business Development Center is offering free workshops on business registration and basic accounting." Desiree scanned the flyer, her heart racing. "This is perfect. Thank you." "You've been researching this for months," the librarian observed. "Time to make it official, don't you think?" That night, as the twins slept peacefully in their room, Desiree lay awake on her sofa bed, staring at the ceiling. The workshop was scheduled during her regular shift at Rosa's. Taking time off would mean lost income she desperately needed, yet without proper business knowledge, her plans for Starlight Events would remain just that, plans. "You're boring," Maxwell's voice echoed in her memory, cruel and dismissive. "You don't fit in my world." Desiree clenched her jaw, her decision made. She would find a way to attend the workshop, even if it meant tightening her already precarious budget. Rosa, as always, proved unexpectedly supportive. "Of course you must go," she insisted when Desiree hesitantly requested the time off. "I'll watch the little ones myself. They can help me roll empanadas." The workshop, held in a sterile community college classroom, opened Desiree's eyes to aspects of business ownership she'd never considered. Tax implications, liability insurance, proper record-keeping. She took detailed notes, asking questions that impressed the instructor with their insight. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into this," the middle-aged instructor commented after the session. "What's your business concept?" "Entertainment coordination," Desiree explained, her passion evident. "Connecting local musical talent with venues that need to increase customer traffic." The instructor nodded approvingly. "Filling a gap in the market. Smart approach." 2 weeks later, clutching a crisp certificate of business registration, Desiree felt a surge of pride unlike anything she'd experienced since the twins' birth. Starlight Events existed officially, no longer just a dream scribbled in notebooks during late-night planning sessions. She celebrated by splurging on cupcakes for the twins and a bottle of inexpensive champagne shared with Rosa after the restaurant closed. "To Starlight Events," Rosa toasted, her weathered face creased with pride. "May it shine brighter than all those fancy Manhattan companies." Desiree nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "And to you, for believing in me when no one else did." With official business cards printed at the copy shop and a basic website created using a free template, Desiree began expanding her network beyond the immediate neighborhood. She approached cafes, restaurants, and small event spaces throughout Queens, pitching her services with growing confidence. Her first major challenge came when a client canceled last minute, leaving a jazz quartet without a venue and a venue without entertainment for a busy Saturday night. "I'm sorry," the restaurant owner said, not sounding particularly apologetic. "We double-booked. Use someone else next time." Rather than accept defeat, Desiree spent the afternoon making frantic calls, eventually placing the quartet at another venue that had experienced a cancellation of their own. Both the musicians and the new venue were so impressed with her quick problem-solving that they signed longer-term contracts. "You're resourceful under pressure," the quartet's leader commented. "That's rare in this business." As Starlight Events slowly grew from handling 3 or 4 small gigs weekly to coordinating entertainment for a dozen venues across Queens, Desiree found herself at Rosa's restaurant less frequently. She now conducted business from her small apartment, the kitchen table serving as her office desk. "Mama, are we rich now?" Jaden asked one evening, watching her count the week's earnings. Desiree laughed, ruffling his hair. "Not yet, buddy, but we're doing better than before." "When will we be rich?" Zora persisted, her expression serious beyond her years. Desiree paused, considering how to answer. "Being rich isn't just about money," she said finally. "It's about having choices, and we're getting more choices every day." The twins' 5th birthday approached as spring blossomed across the city. Desiree, determined to give them a proper celebration for the first time, had saved for months to rent a small community center room and hire a face painter. 2 weeks before the party, she received an unexpected call from a number she didn't recognize. "Is this Desiree Williams, from Starlight Events?" a woman's refined voice inquired. "Yes, this is she. I'm calling from the Harlem Arts Foundation. We're planning a fundraising event next month and heard impressive things about your work with local musicians." Desiree's heart raced. The Harlem Arts Foundation was a respected organization that supported Black artists throughout the city. This was far bigger than anything Starlight had handled previously. "We have a limited budget," the woman continued, "but we're hoping you might be able to coordinate the entertainment portion of our spring fundraiser." "I'd be honored," Desiree replied, working to keep her voice steady. "Could we meet to discuss your vision for the event?" The meeting, held in the Foundation's modest but elegant Harlem office, revealed both the opportunity and the challenge. Their budget was indeed limited, but the event would be attended by significant donors, community leaders, and press. The pressure to deliver excellence with minimal resources was immense. For the next 3 weeks, Desiree worked tirelessly, calling in every favor, negotiating rates with musicians, and strategizing how to create maximum impact with minimal expenditure. The twins, now in half-day kindergarten, spent their afternoons with Rosa or at the community center's affordable after-school program, while Desiree built the most important event of her career. The night of the fundraiser arrived with inevitable last-minute crises. A singer developed laryngitis, the sound equipment delivered was incomplete, and the venue's lighting system proved more complicated than described. Desiree handled each challenge with calm efficiency, her years of problem-solving as a single mother serving her well in the chaos of event production. From a corner of the transformed gallery space, a tall, distinguished-looking man in his mid-30s observed Desiree's methodical management of the situation. Jason Williams Johnson, an investment banker from Chicago visiting New York for business, had attended the fundraiser at a colleague's invitation. What caught his attention wasn't just the impressive quality of the entertainment, but the woman clearly orchestrating everything behind the scenes. As the event wound down, having exceeded expectations despite its modest budget, Jason approached Desiree while she was giving final instructions to the cleanup crew. "Excuse me," he said, his deep voice carrying the polished confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. "Do you have a business card?" Desiree looked up, momentarily taken aback by his directness. She reached into her simple blazer pocket and extracted one of her cards, professionally printed but deliberately understated. "Starlight Events," he read. "You did all this with that budget? Impressive. Very impressive. Thank you," she replied cautiously, years of hardship having taught her to be wary of smooth-talking men in expensive suits. "I'd like to discuss a business opportunity," he continued. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow? The following morning, despite her misgivings, Desiree met Jason at a small cafe near her apartment. She'd arranged for Rosa to watch the twins, telling herself this was strictly professional, regardless of how attractive she found him. Jason didn't waste time on small talk. What you accomplished with that event was remarkable. You maximized impact while minimizing expenditure. Exactly the kind of efficiency I respect. Thank you, Desiree replied, still cautious. I'm interested in investing in businesses with growth potential, he explained, particularly those led by entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. Desiree raised an eyebrow. And you think Starlight qualifies? I know it does. I've already done some research. You've built a growing business from nothing without loans or family money. His expression softened slightly. That takes something special, Desiree. She studied him, looking for the catch. I'm not interested in selling my company or giving up control. I wouldn't expect you to, he replied. I'm proposing an investment that would allow you to expand while maintaining majority ownership. The conversation that followed was unlike any Desiree had experienced. Direct, detailed, and focused entirely on business potential rather than charity or condescension. Jason spoke of market gaps she could fill, expansion possibilities beyond entertainment coordination, and capital requirements for growth. I'm not interested only in the business, he said as they finished their coffee. I'm interested in the mind behind it. You have something special, Desiree. 1 week later, they met again, this time with a formal proposal. A $100,000 investment in exchange for a 40% stake in Starlight Events, with Desiree retaining complete operational control. As she signed the contract with Jason, her first significant injection of capital, Desiree didn't imagine she was meeting not just her future investor, but the man who would become the true father of her children and partner in a billion-dollar empire. Jason's investment proved to be the catalyst Desiree had been waiting for. With the crisp check deposited into the newly opened Starlight Events business account, she felt a surge of both exhilaration and terror. $100,000, more money than she'd ever possessed, now carried the weight of expectation, responsibility, and possibility. First order of business, she announced to the twins over breakfast in their small apartment, is finding a real office. Will we live there too? Jaden asked, milk dribbling down his chin. Desiree smiled, wiping his face with a napkin. No, buddy. The office is just for work. But if business goes well, maybe we can find a bigger apartment soon. 2 weeks of intensive searching led her to a modest storefront in Queens with a large front room and 2 smaller back offices. The rent was reasonable, the location accessible by public transportation, and best of all, it had large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Standing in the empty room, Desiree could already envision the transformation. Desks positioned strategically, a comfortable meeting area for clients, perhaps even a small performance space for auditions. I'll take it, she told the landlord, signing the lease with steady hands that belied her inner nervousness. The grand opening of Starlight Events' first official headquarters occurred on a brilliantly sunny Saturday morning. Desiree had invited local musicians, venue owners, and community members who had supported her journey. Rosa prepared a spread of her famous empanadas and pastries, while Miguel and his band provided gentle background music. Time to cut the ribbon, Jason announced, having flown in from Chicago specifically for the occasion. Desiree stood before the modest storefront, scissors in hand, Jaden and Zora flanking her with toy scissors of their own. The crowd of well-wishers, small but enthusiastic, counted down from 3. Welcome to the official home of Starlight Events, Desiree announced as the ribbon floated to the ground, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. This moment, this achievement, stood in stark contrast to the devastation she'd felt in that snow-covered apartment 3 years earlier. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Desiree purchased office furniture, computers, and a professional phone system. She developed a more sophisticated website with online booking capabilities. Most importantly, she began interviewing candidates for her small but growing team. "Tell me why you want to work for Starlight," she asked each applicant, studying their responses carefully. One candidate, a polished young woman with an impressive resume from a larger agency, answered confidently, "Your company's growth trajectory shows promising financial potential." Another, a music student with limited experience but boundless enthusiasm, replied, "I believe in connecting artists with audiences who need their music. That's what Starlight does, right? You create those connections." Desiree hired the latter, along with 2 other team members who demonstrated similar understanding of her vision. "I'm not just looking for skills," she explained to Jason during one of their regular strategy calls. "I need people who understand our mission of authenticity." With her core team assembled, Desiree focused on expanding Starlight's reach beyond Queens. Her strategy sessions with Jason became increasingly sophisticated, moving from basic operations to market positioning and brand identity. "The major agencies are missing something crucial," Desiree explained, pacing the small conference room during one such meeting. "They present diversity as a checkbox, something to be ticked off rather than genuinely embraced." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "There's definitely a vacuum there. The big agencies ignore authentic diversity. We can fill that gap." "Exactly," Desiree replied, her eyes lighting up. "We're not just selling events, we're selling genuine human connections." As Starlight's reputation grew, so did its client list. What began as neighborhood restaurants and community centers expanded to include corporate events, product launches, and private celebrations. Desiree's presentations to potential clients evolved from nervous pitches to confident demonstrations of value. "When you hire Starlight," she told a room full of marketing executives at a midtown office, "you're not just getting entertainment, you're getting authentic connections with audiences you've been trying to reach." Her growing success allowed for significant improvements in the twins' lives. At 5 years old, Jaden and Zora transferred from public kindergarten to a small private school with an arts-focused curriculum. Their new backpacks, uniforms, and school supplies were purchased without the painful budgetary calculations that had characterized every previous expenditure. One evening, as Jason had begun spending more time in New York to oversee his investment, he arrived at Desiree's apartment with a beautifully wrapped package. "A little something for Jaden," he explained, somewhat sheepishly. "I noticed his interest in strategy games when I was here last week." Inside was an exquisite chess set with hand-carved wooden pieces. Jaden's eyes widened as Jason patiently explained the rules, setting up the board on the living room floor. "The knight moves in an L shape," Jason demonstrated, moving the piece across the board. "Like this." Desiree watched from the kitchen doorway, a strange warmth spreading through her chest as Jaden absorbed the instructions with intense concentration. There was something profoundly moving about seeing her son engaged in such focused interaction with a man who showed genuine interest in his development. "Your turn," Jason encouraged, after explaining the basic moves. "Let's see what you've learned." To both adults' surprise, Jaden demonstrated an immediate aptitude for the game, quickly grasping not just the mechanics, but the underlying strategy. After Jaden executed a particularly clever move, Jason looked up at Desiree with undisguised admiration. "This kid is a natural strategist," he said, genuine respect in his voice. "He's thinking 3 moves ahead already." Not to be outdone, Zora soon demonstrated her own remarkable talent. During a client meeting at the office, she had wandered over to the small, upright piano Desiree had purchased for the reception area, picking out a simple melody by ear. "Has she had lessons?" Jason asked, observing Zora's focused expression as her small fingers found the correct keys. "Never," Desiree replied. "We couldn't afford them." The following week, a piano teacher arrived at their apartment, a gift from Jason that Desiree accepted after some hesitation. As Zora played her first halting scales, Jason applauded enthusiastically, a special connection forming between them over their shared appreciation for music. These peaceful days of growth and expansion were interrupted abruptly one Tuesday morning when Desiree's phone rang just as she arrived at the office. "Ms. Williams, this is Patricia Lowell from Global Electronics. I'm afraid we need to cancel our event scheduled for Thursday." Desiree's stomach dropped. Global Electronics represented Starlight's largest contract to date, a product launch with a $50,000 budget, scheduled in just 48 hours. "May I ask why?" she managed, struggling to keep her voice professional. "Our CEO has decided to go with another agency, one he's worked with previously. I realize this is last minute, and I apologize for the inconvenience." After hanging up, Desiree gathered her team in the conference room, not bothering to hide the gravity of the situation. "Global Electronics just canceled. We're looking at a $50,000 loss if we don't find a replacement event. The venue is booked, the performers are contracted, and we've already invested in production elements." The room fell silent, the reality of potential financial ruin hanging heavy in the air. Starlight was still new, still vulnerable. A loss of this magnitude could destroy everything they'd built. "We could sue for breach of contract," suggested her operations manager tentatively. Desiree shook her head. "That would take months, if not years. We need a solution now." She paced the room, mind racing through possibilities. Suddenly she stopped, a determined gleam in her eye. "We're going to transform this. Contact every media connection we have. Music journalists, event bloggers, social media influencers. We're hosting a showcase." "A showcase?" her assistant echoed uncertainly. "Free admission. We'll feature all the talent we've been representing. Make it an industry event. Invite venue owners, corporate event planners, everyone who might hire our artists in the future." The team sprang into action, transforming crisis into opportunity. For the next 48 hours, they worked around the clock, reconfiguring the product launch into a talent showcase. The venue remained the same, but instead of promoting electronics, they would be promoting their own roster of performers. On Thursday evening, Desiree stood at the entrance of the venue, greeting arriving guests with outward confidence that masked her inner terror. Would anyone show up to a hastily arranged showcase? Had they just thrown good money after bad? To her astonishment, the space filled quickly. Media representatives, curious about the last-minute invitation. Corporate event planners, intrigued by the promise of discovering new talent. Venue owners, always on the lookout for fresh acts to book. The showcase unfolded beautifully, each performer representing a different facet of Starlight's diverse talent roster. Jazz combos, spoken word artists, classical musicians, R&B singers, all demonstrating excellence that transcended their relative obscurity. Among the attendees, Desiree noticed several executives from major corporations, including, ironically, 2 vice presidents from Global Electronics, who had apparently not received the memo about the cancellation. "This is extraordinary," commented one corporate event planner approaching Desiree during intermission. "The quality and diversity of talent you've assembled. If this is how you respond to problems, I'm impressed." By evening's end, Desiree's inbox was flooded with follow-up requests, including several that far exceeded the value of the cancelled Global Electronics event. That night, Desiree and Jason celebrated in her new apartment, a modest but significantly larger 2-bedroom in Queens that the twins no longer had to share. "To crisis management," Jason toasted, raising his champagne glass, "and the woman who turns disasters into triumphs." Later, after the twins were asleep, they stood on the small balcony overlooking the neighborhood, the night air cool against their skin. "You're remarkable," Jason said quietly. "What you did today, most people would have collapsed under that pressure." "I didn't have the luxury of collapsing," Desiree replied. "I never have." Their hands found each other in the darkness, fingers intertwining for the first time, an acknowledgement of connection that had grown beyond business into something neither was quite ready to name. While observing the city from the lights of her new apartment, hand entwined with Jason's, Desiree didn't know that in 5 years they would be married, with the Starlight valued at $500 million and poised to secretly acquire the first shares of Thornton Hotels. The evening breeze on the balcony carried the promise of change as Desiree and Jason's hands remained intertwined, neither willing to break the connection that had grown beyond business into something more profound. 3 years passed with the speed of a New York minute, yet with the weight of a lifetime of transformation. The Starlight had expanded beyond event coordination into talent management and content production, becoming a respected name in an industry that had once seemed impenetrable to a single mother from Queens. What began as a desperate attempt to survive had blossomed into a thriving enterprise that now occupied a gleaming office building in downtown Brooklyn, employing 30 full-time staff and representing over 200 artists across the metropolitan area. On a crisp autumn morning, Desiree stood in the marble-floored lobby of the Brooklyn courthouse, her heart racing with anticipation. Jason waited beside her, dressed in an impeccable navy suit, his normally confident demeanor tinged with rare nervousness. 8-year-old Jaden and Zora fidgeted in their Sunday best, understanding that today marked something momentous but not fully comprehending its significance. "All rise," the bailiff announced as the judge entered the family court chamber. The adoption proceedings were brief but profoundly moving. Jason knelt before the twins, his voice thick with emotion as he made his vows. "Jaden, Zora, from this day forward, I promise to be your father, not just in name, but in every way that matters. I will support your dreams, guide you through challenges, and love you unconditionally for all the days of my life." Tears streamed down Desiree's face as the judge pronounced the final words. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I hereby declare these children legally adopted, with all rights and privileges thereto. From this day forward, they shall be known as Jaden and Zora Williams Johnson." Outside the courthouse, Jason lifted both children onto his shoulders, their laughter echoing through the concrete canyon of downtown Brooklyn. Desiree captured the moment on her phone, the image a stark contrast to the isolation she had felt in that hospital room 8 years earlier. 2 weeks later, they moved into their new home, a spacious brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with bay windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Desiree stood in the doorway of the twins' rooms, separate bedrooms for the first time in their lives, watching as they explored their new domains with wide-eyed wonder. "Is this really ours, Mom?" Zora asked, running her fingers along the built-in bookshelf that Jason had already filled with classic children's literature and sheet music for her growing piano repertoire. "Yes, baby. This is our home, built with our work, our determination." Jason appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Built with love," he added softly. The twins flourished in their new environment. Jaden, enrolled in a prestigious private school known for its mathematics program, quickly distinguished himself in regional chess competitions. His logical mind seemed perfectly suited to the game's complex strategies, and he absorbed new concepts with a hunger that impressed even his most experienced coaches. At the state championship in Albany, Jaden faced opponents twice his age with calm determination. When he executed the winning move in the final round, Jason lifted him onto his shoulders, parading him around the venue while Desiree clutched her chest, overcome with pride. "That's my son," Jason told everyone within earshot, the words carrying a weight that brought fresh tears to Desiree's eyes. My son, not someone else's biological child he had graciously accepted, but his son in every way that mattered. Zora's talent blossomed equally dramatically. Her piano playing, once merely promising, developed into genuine virtuosity under the guidance of a renowned instructor from Juilliard's preparatory division. At her first major recital, she performed Chopin with such emotional maturity that several audience members assumed the program had misprinted her age. "She has a rare gift," her instructor confided to Desiree afterward. "The technical ability can be taught, but that intuitive understanding of the music's emotional landscape, that's innate." Professionally, Desiree continued to redefine success on her own terms. The Starlight's headquarters now occupied an entire floor in a sleek office building, The company logo illuminated in the reception area where visitors were greeted by a sophisticated multimedia display showcasing their artists and events. Morning meetings had evolved from desperate attempts to secure any business to strategic discussions about which high-profile clients aligned with their brand values. Desiree led these sessions with quiet authority, her designer wardrobe and confident demeanor a universe away from the exhausted young mother who had once counted coins for diapers. Our Q3 growth exceeded projections by 27%, her CFO reported during one such meeting. The talent management division is outperforming our most optimistic models. Desiree nodded, scanning the report with practiced efficiency. Excellent. Let's discuss the Los Angeles expansion timeline. After the meeting, her assistant approached tentatively. There's a potential client requesting a consultation. Cambridge Cosmetics is planning their annual foundation gala. Desiree froze, the name triggering an avalanche of memories. Cambridge. Melissa Cambridge, Maxwell's wife. Ex-wife now, if the society pages were to be believed. Their divorce had been finalized 2 years earlier amid rumors of his infidelity. Did they specifically request me? She asked, keeping her voice neutral. Yes, Ms. Cambridge asked for you personally. She mentioned being impressed by the Henderson Foundation event we produced last month. That evening, Desiree discussed the situation with Jason over dinner after the twins had gone upstairs to complete their homework. It's unsettling, she admitted, twirling pasta around her fork without eating it. The connection to him. Jason studied her thoughtfully. Do you want to refuse? Would that be mixing personal history with business decisions? Maybe, Jason acknowledged, but you've earned the right to choose your clients. Desiree set down her fork, her decision crystallizing. I'll accept, not out of vengeance or curiosity, but because we're the best company for the job. She straightened her shoulders. Besides, Melissa was as much a victim of his deception as I was. The Cambridge Cosmetics Foundation Gala proved to be exactly the kind of high-profile event that could elevate the Starlight to new heights. Held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the event required months of meticulous planning, with Desiree personally overseeing every detail from lighting design to performer selection. On the night of the gala, New York's elite arrived in a parade of limousines and designer gowns. Desiree, dressed in a stunning emerald Dior that complemented her complexion perfectly, directed her team with calm efficiency from a discreet corner of the Great Hall. Midway through the evening, as the string quartet began a Vivaldi piece, Melissa Cambridge approached. At 42, she remained strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair elegantly styled, her posture regal despite the whispered rumors of emotional devastation following her divorce. Ms. Williams-Johnson, she said, extending a manicured hand. I wanted to personally thank you. This event has exceeded all expectations. I'm pleased you're satisfied, Ms. Cambridge, Desiree replied professionally. Melissa's perfectly composed expression faltered slightly. I always knew there was another, she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the music. Back when I returned from Europe, there were rumors, phone calls he'd leave the room to take. Desiree maintained her professional demeanor, though her heart raced. Ms. Cambridge. He damages everything he touches, Melissa continued, her gaze direct. He destroyed us both in different ways. But look at you now. She gestured around the meticulously orchestrated event. You've built something remarkable from the ashes. Before Desiree could respond, Melissa was whisked away by another guest, leaving her with the unsettling realization that her past with Maxwell was perhaps not as secret as she'd believed. The gala's success reverberated through New York's social circles. Coverage in prominent publications praised the event's elegant execution and innovative elements. Most significantly, it caught the attention of Forbes magazine, leading to Desiree's inclusion in their prestigious 40 Under 40 list, highlighting her as one of the most promising entrepreneurs under 40. The morning the issue hit newsstands, Jason brought it home along with fresh bagels and coffee. The twins crowded around the kitchen island, marveling at their mother's photograph alongside a profile detailing her journey from humble beginnings to industry leadership. "Mom's famous!" Zora exclaimed, carefully cutting out the article to add to her scrapbook of family achievements. "She's always been famous to us," Jason replied, wrapping an arm around Desiree's shoulders and pressing a kiss to her temple. That evening, as they celebrated in their living room, the twins jumping on the sofa in uncharacteristic exuberance while Jason opened champagne, Desiree felt a profound sense of vindication. Not bitter or vengeful, but the quiet satisfaction of having proven her worth on her own terms. As the children finally settled down, exhausted from their excitement, Jason pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the coffee table. "What's this?" Desiree asked, opening it to find financial statements and stock analyses. "Something interesting came across my desk today," Jason explained, his expression carefully neutral. "The Thornton Hotels are in financial difficulty. Their stock has been declining steadily for the past 18 months. Desiree studied the reports, her brow furrowing. Poor management? Partly. Maxwell's leadership has been erratic since the divorce. There are rumors of drinking problems, impulsive decisions. The board is getting nervous. "Why show me this?" Desiree asked, though something in her already knew the answer. Jason's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. It might be time for a strategic acquisition. JWJ Investments could begin purchasing shares gradually, building a position without attracting attention. Desiree stared at the Thornton Hotel's logo on the report, the stylized T that had once represented everything beyond her reach. A slow smile spread across her face, not malicious, but thoughtful. "Not revenge," she said quietly. "Justice, poetic justice." While Desiree considered the financial report on the Thornton Hotels, an idea began to form, not vengeful retribution, but elegant resolution, without imagining that within 4 years she would be organizing the wedding of the man who had abandoned her, poised to reveal a truth that would shake Manhattan society to its core. The idea of acquiring shares in the Thornton Hotels wasn't merely business strategy, it was closure. As Desiree closed the folder containing the financial reports, she felt the satisfying click of puzzle pieces falling into place. 4 years passed, transforming both her personal and professional landscapes with the steady certainty of seasons changing. By 2018, the Starlight Enterprises had evolved far beyond its humble beginnings as an event coordination service. Now a multimedia conglomerate valued at over $2 billion, the company occupied 3 full floors in a gleaming Manhattan skyscraper, its distinctive logo illuminated against the night sky, visible from miles away, a beacon of possibility. Desiree Williams Johnson, at 32, had transformed as profoundly as her company. Gone was the hesitant young woman who once counted pennies for diapers. In her place stood a composed executive whose understated elegance graced the covers of business magazines and whose opinions were sought by industry leaders. Her wardrobe of tailored designer suits and carefully selected jewelry spoke not of ostentation, but of quiet confidence, the confidence of someone who no longer needed to prove her worth to anyone. On a crisp October morning, Desiree stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the city awaken beneath her. The skyline that had once seemed so forbidding now felt like a chessboard where she confidently moved her pieces, each strategic decision expanding her influence. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, her executive assistant Angela announced from the doorway. "The quarterly reports look exceptional." Desiree nodded, gathering the leather portfolio embossed with the Starlight logo. "Thank you. Have the international expansion projections been distributed?" In the sleek boardroom, executive team members were already seated around the massive glass table. Financial graphs displayed on wall-mounted screens painted a picture of remarkable growth. Desiree took her place at the head of the table, surveying the room with quiet pride. Her team, diverse, brilliant, dedicated, represented everything she had envisioned when she'd first dreamed of creating a different kind of company. Third quarter results exceeded projections by 23%, the CFO announced, advancing through slides of impressive metrics. Our talent representation division has grown 40% year over year, and our content production arm has secured distribution deals with 3 major streaming platforms. European expansion is proceeding ahead of schedule, added the International Development Director. The London office will be operational by January, and we're finalizing lease terms for Paris and Berlin. After the meeting, Jason waited in her office, his expression a mixture of triumph and mischief. When the door closed behind her, he slid a confidential report across her desk. 15%, he said simply. Desiree raised an eyebrow, picking up the document. Of Thornton Hotels? Jason nodded, satisfaction evident in his smile. JWJ Investments has acquired 15% of outstanding shares through various shell companies and investment vehicles. They haven't noticed the pattern yet. Desiree ran her fingers lightly over the Thornton logo on the report. How is their financial situation? Deteriorating. Maxwell's leadership has been problematic. The board is concerned but reluctant to challenge the family name. As if on cue, Angela appeared with a tablet displaying a Bloomberg article, Empire in Crisis, Maxwell Thornton faces scandals and declining profits. The accompanying photo showed Maxwell leaving a Manhattan restaurant, looking haggard and significantly older than his 40 years, a far cry from the polished executive who had once dismissed Desiree as beneath him. Save that, Desiree instructed, her voice neutral. It might be relevant to our market analysis. That evening, Desiree and Jason attended Jaden's national programming competition at Columbia University. At 10, Jaden had already established himself as a prodigy, creating algorithms that impressed even veteran software engineers. Seated in the auditorium, watching her son confidently explain his code to a panel of tech executives, Desiree felt a surge of pride that momentarily overwhelmed her. His approach to problem-solving is extraordinary, whispered a Google executive seated nearby. Has he considered our summer internship program for gifted youth? When Jaden was announced as the winner, Jason leapt to his feet, applauding with unrestrained enthusiasm. Later, as they celebrated over ice cream, Jaden clutched his trophy with a quiet confidence that reminded Desiree painfully of Maxwell, but with a kindness in his eyes that was entirely his own. The following weekend brought another celebration as Zora performed with the Young Philharmonic of New York. Her delicate rendering of Chopin left the audience breathless, several critics visibly moved by the emotional maturity emanating from someone so young. She plays with a depth of understanding that pianists twice her age struggle to achieve, her instructor commented afterward. The Juilliard pre-college program would be fortunate to have her. Watching her children thrive, Desiree often reflected on Maxwell's cruel dismissal of them as bastards and threats to his lineage. How short-sighted he had been, how fundamentally wrong about their worth and potential. These children he had rejected were already making marks on the world that his own achievements couldn't match. One Sunday afternoon, Desiree made a pilgrimage of sorts, driving the family Range Rover to Queens. The neighborhood had gentrified somewhat, but Rosa's restaurant remained largely unchanged, a testament to authenticity in a city constantly reinventing itself. Rosa, now in her 70s but still spry, rushed from behind the counter when the bell announced their arrival. "My babies!" she exclaimed, embracing first Desiree, then the twins, then Jason. "Look how beautiful you all are." The restaurant had been renovated. New floors, updated kitchen equipment, expanded dining area, all funded by Desiree, who had insisted on investing in the business that had once been her lifeline. "Business is good," Rosa reported proudly. "That magazine article about your start here brought many curious customers. I tell them all how you used to sing while serving tables, these two sleeping in fruit crates in the back room." "You exaggerate, Rosa," Desiree laughed. Though the memories remained vivid, the exhaustion, the fear, the sheer determination that had fueled those early days. "I exaggerate nothing," Rosa insisted. "I tell them how this woman built an empire starting from my little back room, how she studied business books while her babies slept, how she never gave up." The twins listened to these stories with a mixture of awe and embarrassment, struggling to reconcile their current privileged lives with the hardship that had preceded them. Desiree made sure they understood their history, not to burden them with it, but to instill the same resilience that had carried her through her darkest hours. November brought the official opening ceremony for Starlight's new headquarters. Media crowded the expansive lobby as Desiree, flanked by her family and executive team, cut the ceremonial ribbon. Flashbulbs captured the moment, Desiree radiant in Alexander McQueen, the twins polished in coordinating outfits, Jason beaming with pride beside them. Starlight Enterprises began with a simple vision, Desiree addressed the gathered crowd. To create authentic connections through entertainment, to celebrate voices that had been marginalized, to build something that reflected the true diversity of our world. She paused, surveying the faces watching her, employees, clients, industry leaders, press. "We built not to prove something to others, but to prove to ourselves what we always knew was possible. That vision has carried us from a tiny office in Queens to this moment, and it will carry us forward as we continue to expand globally." The tour that followed showcased the stunning new facilities, state-of-the-art recording studios, performance spaces, elegant conference rooms, and most proudly for Desiree, the on-site childcare center and wellness facilities that reflected her commitment to creating a humane workplace. "The meditation room was Jason's idea," she explained to a journalist from Fast Company. "The scholarship program for employees' children was mine. We believe success shouldn't require sacrificing family or well-being." Later that evening, as the celebration continued with a gala for clients and industry partners, Angela approached with uncharacteristic urgency. "Mrs. Williams-Johnson, we've just received a rather significant proposal. A client wants us to produce what they're calling the wedding of the century. The budget is, well, essentially unlimited." Desiree raised an eyebrow. "That's intriguing. Which client?" Angela handed her a thick proposal folder. It came through Amber Reed's management team. "She's marrying into a prominent hotel family. They want full media coverage, international press, the works." Desiree opened the folder, her breath catching as she saw the name, Reed Thornton Wedding. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt slightly beneath her feet. Maxwell was getting married again, to Amber Reed, a 25-year-old social media influencer whose carefully curated life had garnered millions of followers. "Are you all right?" Angela asked, noticing her sudden stillness. "Perfectly fine," Desiree replied, composure returning instantly. "It's an interesting opportunity. Tell them we'll review the proposal and respond within 48 hours." That night, after the twins were asleep, Desiree showed the folder to Jason in their home office. He studied it silently, then looked up at her with a question in his eyes. "It's the perfect opportunity," she said, answering his unspoken concern. "Not for revenge, for completion of a circle." "Are you sure?" Jason asked, reaching for her hand. "You've built everything without him. You don't need this closure." "It's not just about closure for me," Desiree replied, gazing at the photographs of her sleeping children she kept on her desk. "It's about justice, poetic justice." The following morning, Desiree called her executive team together. "We're taking on the Reed Thornton wedding," she announced. "I want our best people on this. It will be the most visible event we've produced to date. The Plaza Hotel, unlimited budget, international coverage," her events director noted, reviewing the details. "It's certainly high profile." "It's more than that," Desiree replied. "It's a statement. Every detail must be perfect. This event will showcase exactly what Starlight represents." Later that day, she signed the contract herself, her elegant signature a testament to how far she had come from the young woman who once trembled at the sight of Maxwell Thornton. "The Starlight Enterprises has the pleasure of accepting the production of the Reed Thornton event," she wrote in her personalized note, knowing that Maxwell would never recognize her name or company until they came face to face. While signing the contract to produce the Reed Thornton wedding, Desiree didn't imagine that she would be orchestrating not just a social event, but the perfect stage for a reckoning 15 years in the making. The contract for the Reed Thornton wedding sat on Desiree's desk, her signature still drying on the thick cream paper. She ran her fingers over the embossed Starlight logo, savoring the weight of the moment. Planning Maxwell's wedding wasn't revenge, it was the universe offering a perfect symmetry she couldn't have scripted better herself. The week of the wedding arrived with the controlled chaos typical of high-profile events. The Starlight team transformed the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel into a vision of ethereal elegance. Crystal chandeliers were enhanced with additional lighting elements, creating a celestial effect that justified the company's name. Thousands of white orchids, Amber's chosen flower, cascaded from custom-built structures, their delicate blooms catching the light in ways that seemed almost magical. "The lighting needs to be softer in the northwest corner," Desiree instructed, surveying the space with a critical eye. Her Louboutin heels clicked authoritatively across the marble floor as she moved through the space, iPad in hand, making minute adjustments that only her trained eye could detect. Despite the enormity of the project, Desiree had maintained professional distance, delegating most client interactions to her team. Amber Reed had communicated exclusively with Starlight's junior executives, her requests filtered through layers of assistants and planners. Maxwell himself had been conspicuously absent from all planning meetings, represented instead by an army of event coordinators and personal assistants. This deliberate separation had preserved the element of surprise that fate seemed determined to orchestrate. Not once had Maxwell's path crossed with Desiree's during the months of preparation. It was as if the universe was saving their inevitable collision for maximum impact. "Mrs. Williams-Johnson," Angela's voice came through her earpiece. "The flower delivery for the bridal suite has arrived, but there's a problem with the color tone. They're more cream than white." "Have them replaced immediately," Desiree responded. "The contract specified pure white. And check on the champagne delivery. It should have arrived 20 minutes ago." The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, a perfect October day. Desiree arrived at the plaza at 6 in the morning, impeccably dressed in a tailored Armani pantsuit, her natural curls styled in a sophisticated updo. The controlled frenzy of final preparations energized rather than drained her. This was her element, the orchestration of perfection down to the smallest detail. "The head table centerpiece needs to be elevated another 2 inches, she instructed a designer, "and the lighting cue for the first dance needs to be precisely timed with the 3rd measure of the song, not the 4th. At 10:30, her communication device vibrated. Angela's voice sounded unusually tense. "Mrs. Williams-Johnson, we have a situation. The groom has arrived unexpectedly early and is demanding to speak with whoever is in charge. He's in the main lobby and seems agitated." Desiree paused, her hand hovering over a place setting she'd been adjusting. The moment she had neither sought nor avoided had arrived. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed her already perfect suit and touched her earpiece. "Tell him I'll be right there," she replied, her voice betraying none of the complex emotions surging beneath her composed exterior. In the 5-minute walk from the grand ballroom to the lobby, Desiree mentally prepared herself. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about the past. It was about demonstrating, through her mere existence, how profoundly wrong he had been about her. The plaza's majestic lobby gleamed with old-world luxury. Near the concierge desk stood a man with his back to her, gesticulating emphatically while speaking into a phone. Even from behind, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he ran his free hand through his hair when agitated. Mannerisms unchanged, despite the 15 years that had passed. "Mr. Thornton?" she called, her voice clear and professional. "I'm Desiree Williams-Johnson, CEO of Starlight Enterprises." Maxwell turned slowly at the sound of her voice. The phone he'd been clutching slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the marble floor. His face, once youthfully arrogant, now showed the effects of hard living and harder decisions, lines etched around his eyes, a certain heaviness to his features that spoke of dissipation rather than maturity. "Desiree?" His voice emerged as a hoarse whisper, eyes widening in shock as recognition dawned. She maintained a pleasant, professional smile, as if they were merely acquaintances from a distant business conference rather than two people whose lives had collided with catastrophic consequences. "What an irony to find you here after all these years, Maxwell," she commented, her tone light but with an undercurrent of steel. "It seems you'll finally be paying for my work, since you never paid for what we made together." Color drained from Maxwell's face, then returned in a rush of red that climbed from his collar to his hairline. He bent awkwardly to retrieve his fallen phone, buying time to regain his composure. "I didn't know. My assistant handled the arrangements. If I had known." He stumbled over his words, the once smooth executive reduced to incoherent fragments. "If you had known that the insufficient girl now runs one of the country's premier entertainment conglomerates," Desiree supplied, her smile never wavering, "would you have chosen another company for your big day?" Maxwell's eyes darted nervously around the lobby, as if seeking escape routes. His gaze fixed momentarily on her left hand, noting the substantial diamond on her ring finger, then traveled over her designer suit, taking in the unmistakable aura of success that surrounded her. You've done well," he managed, the understatement almost laughable in its inadequacy. "I have," she agreed simply. "Starlight Enterprises is valued at over $3 billion now. We employ over 800 people across 3 continents." Maxwell swallowed hard, visibly struggling to reconcile the confident executive before him with the desperate young woman he had abandoned. That's impressive. Mom, the band has questions about their positioning for the reception entrance. 2 voices called simultaneously, interrupting the tense exchange. Jaden and Zora approached, both tall and graceful at 15, carrying tablets with event layouts displayed on their screens. Despite their casual demeanor, both exuded the same quiet confidence as their mother, their private school uniforms exchanged for junior versions of professional attire. The blood drained from Maxwell's face as he stared at the teenagers. The resemblance was undeniable. Jaden had his jawline, his nose, while Zora had inherited his eyes and the distinctive arch of his eyebrows. Yet there was something fundamentally different about them, a warmth, an openness that Maxwell himself had always lacked. "These are my children," Desiree said simply, placing her hands on their shoulders with evident pride. Jaden and Zora Williams-Johnson, both students in the advanced program at Fieldston School, likely headed to Yale, according to their college counselors. The twins regarded the stranger with polite curiosity, unaware of the seismic revelation occurring before them. "Mr. Thornton is concerned about the floral arrangements, darlings," Desiree continued smoothly. "Would you mind checking if the white orchid installations have been completed according to specifications?" "Sure, Mom," Zora replied, while Jaden nodded, both turning with synchronized efficiency to attend to the task. As they walked away, Maxwell stared after them, his expression a complex mixture of shock, regret, and something that might have been longing. "They are," he began, his voice barely audible. "Impressive?" Desiree supplied. "Yes, they are. Jaden is a mathematical prodigy who's already taking college-level courses. Zora recently performed with the New York Philharmonic's Youth Orchestra at Lincoln Center. Do they know?" Maxwell couldn't finish the question. "That the man who told me they were a mistake never wanted to meet them?" Desiree's voice remained controlled, but her eyes flashed with momentary fire. "No. They have a wonderful father who adopted them and loves them unconditionally." The enormity of what he had discarded seemed to hit Maxwell all at once. He staggered slightly, bracing himself against a marble column. I never thought. That's precisely the problem, Maxwell. You never thought about anyone but yourself. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Amber Reed, surrounded by her entourage of stylists, photographers, and assistants. At 25, she radiated the particular glow of youth, beauty, and wealth, her blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls, her designer tracksuit bearing the logo of her own lifestyle brand. "Darling, you must see the ballroom. It's absolutely divine," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Maxwell's waist. "The Starlight team is simply magical. Every detail is perfection." She turned to Desiree, eyes widening in recognition. "Oh my God, you're Desiree Williams-Johnson. I follow you on Instagram. Your Vogue profile was so inspiring." Maxwell looked increasingly ill as Amber gushed over Desiree, seemingly oblivious to the tension crackling between her fiancé and the event planner. "Your company is absolutely the best in the business," Amber continued enthusiastically. "When my manager suggested Starlight, I told her to spare no expense. This wedding will be featured in my documentary series, so everything has to be beyond perfect." "We aim to exceed expectations," Desiree replied graciously. Maxwell's phone rang, offering temporary reprieve from the excruciating interaction. He stepped away, his face darkening as he listened to the caller. "What do you mean, sold? To whom? Since when?" His voice rose in alarm. He ended the call, turning to Desiree with dawning suspicion. "The Thornton hotels have just been acquired by an anonymous conglomerate." Desiree's smile widened slightly. "Perhaps you should verify who now owns 51% of your family company's shares. As you always said, business is business, isn't it?" "You couldn't possibly," Maxwell began, disbelief warring with growing horror. "JWJ Investments," Desiree replied simply, referring to her husband's company. "Your father should have been more careful with his investments. The debts accumulated, the shares devalued. We acquired the majority stake over the past 48 hours. Maxwell's face contorted in shock and betrayal. "This is revenge," he whispered. "This is business," Desiree corrected him. "The Thornton properties have been underperforming for years due to mismanagement. They represent a sound investment opportunity under proper leadership." Amber, sensing the sudden tension, looked between them with growing confusion. "Is everything okay?" "Perfectly fine," Desiree assured her. "Just discussing some business matters with Mr. Thornton. Now, shall we review the ceremony timing? The string quartet is scheduled to begin precisely at 2 o'clock. Throughout the ceremony, Maxwell remained visibly shaken, mechanically going through the motions while his mind clearly grappled with the double shock of encountering Desiree and learning of his company's acquisition. From her position at the back of the ballroom, Desiree observed the proceedings with professional attention to detail, making minor adjustments through her earpiece to ensure perfection. Around her, members of New York's elite, many of whom had once deemed her unworthy of their world, now approached with deferential smiles, eager to establish connection with the CEO of Starlight Enterprises. She noted their curious glances between her and Maxwell, the whispered conversations behind program booklets. Rumors were beginning to circulate, connections being made. While Amber glowed with bridal happiness, Maxwell continued to cast stunned glances toward Desiree throughout the reception, his expression that of a man watching his carefully constructed reality crumble around him. As the champagne flowed and the orchestra played, the whispers grew louder, the curious glances more obvious. The perfect society wedding was becoming something else entirely, the opening act of a reckoning 15 years in the making. The whispers rippling through the reception hall grew more insistent as the evening progressed. Maxwell stood isolated in a corner, champagne glass clutched in his white-knuckled grip, eyes following Desiree as she moved efficiently through the crowd, directing her staff with subtle gestures. His world, so carefully constructed on privilege and appearances, was crumbling beneath his Italian leather shoes. Dawn broke over Manhattan with unforgiving clarity the morning after the wedding. Maxwell hadn't slept, his mind racing between the twin revelations that had shattered his carefully constructed reality. Desiree's triumphant return and the loss of his family's hotel empire. He sat in his penthouse office, tie loosened, hair disheveled, staring at financial reports that confirmed his worst fears. The Thornton Hotels had indeed been acquired by JWJ Investments, a company he now knew belonged to Desiree's husband. An emergency board meeting had been hastily arranged for 9 o'clock. Executives and family shareholders would gather to discuss the hostile takeover, but Maxwell already understood the futility of resistance. The acquisition had been executed with surgical precision, shares purchased through various shell companies until the critical 51% threshold was reached. His phone rang incessantly. Lawyers, family members, journalists seeking comment on both the takeover and the increasingly viral story of his connection to Desiree. Someone at the wedding had recognized her, made the connection, and now the whispers had become headlines. Abandoned pregnant girlfriend now owns Thornton Hotels. Meanwhile, across town in the Starlight headquarters, Desiree conducted her own emergency meeting with calm efficiency. The acquisition was completed legally through established market channels, she informed her executive team. The Thornton properties will be integrated into our hospitality division over the next 6 months, rebranded under the Starlight banner. What about the current management? Her COO inquired. We'll retain most staff, Desiree replied. The workers shouldn't suffer for leadership failures. As for the executive team, she paused, allowing herself a small smile. Changes will be necessary. Jason sat beside her, pride evident in his expression. The financial restructuring will begin immediately. Their debt load is significant but manageable under proper stewardship. The meeting adjourned, leaving Desiree and Jason alone in the sleek conference room. He took her hand, his expression searching. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. Desiree considered the question. "Satisfied," she finally said. "Not vengeful, just complete." Her phone buzzed with a notification. The first tabloid headline had appeared: Thornton Scandal, Hotel Heir's Secret Children Revealed at Wedding. Accompanying the sensational text was a photo of Jaden and Zora at the plaza, their resemblance to Maxwell unmistakable. "The twins," she whispered, suddenly concerned. "They can't see this." Jason's expression hardened. "I'll call the school. They should be protected from the media circus." Before they could strategize further, Angela appeared at the door. "Mrs. Williams-Johnson, Maxwell Thornton is in the lobby. He's demanding to see you." Desiree exchanged a glance with Jason, who raised an eyebrow. "Your call," he said. "Send him up," she decided. "This conversation is overdue." 10 minutes later, Maxwell was escorted into her office. The contrast between them could not have been more stark. Desiree radiating composed power behind her executive desk, Maxwell disheveled and desperate, the polish of wealth unable to disguise his inner turmoil. "You planned this," he accused without preamble. "All of it. The wedding, the takeover. This is revenge." Desiree regarded him coolly. "Revenge would imply I've spent 15 years obsessing over you, Maxwell. I assure you that's not the case." "Then why?" he demanded, pacing the expansive office. "Why take my company? Why humiliate me at my own wedding?" "Your company was failing due to mismanagement," she replied evenly. "It represented a sound investment opportunity. As for the wedding, that was simply the universe's sense of irony. Your fiancé selected Starlight based on our reputation for excellence." Maxwell stopped pacing, staring at the wall of awards and magazine covers featuring Desiree. "And the children? Our children?" "My children," Desiree corrected him firmly. "Yours biologically, perhaps, but in every way that matters, they are Jason's." "I have rights," Maxwell insisted, a desperate edge to his voice. Desiree's laugh was soft but cutting. "Rights? Let me remind you of your exact words, Maxwell. You're a mistake, Desiree, a burden I should never have carried. My family would never accept someone like you, let alone bastards that might threaten our lineage." She leaned forward. You relinquished any rights the moment you walked out that door 15 years ago." The color drained from Maxwell's face as his own words returned to haunt him. He collapsed into a chair opposite her desk. "I was young, selfish. I made a terrible mistake." "Yes," Desiree agreed simply. "You did." "Please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let me meet them properly. Let me explain." "Explain what?" Desiree interrupted. "That you abandoned their pregnant mother? That you called them a mistake before they were even born? That you threatened legal action if I ever tried to prove paternity?" Maxwell flinched with each accusation. "People change, Desiree. I've changed." "Have you?" she asked skeptically. "Or are you simply facing consequences for the first time in your privileged life?" The intercom on Desiree's desk buzzed. "Mrs. Williams-Johnson, Amber Reed is calling. She says it's urgent." Maxwell's expression crumpled further. She saw the news. The wedding night ended with her locking herself in the hotel bathroom. "I'll take the call later," Desiree informed her assistant. Turning back to Maxwell, she added, "Your personal drama isn't my concern." "What about the hotels?" he asked, clearly grasping for any foothold. "My family built that company over generations. And now it will be properly managed," Desiree replied. "We'll be restructuring the executive team immediately. Your services as CEO are no longer required." The finality of her statement hung in the air between them. Maxwell stared at her, the full magnitude of his loss finally registering. "You've taken everything," he whispered. "No, Maxwell," Desiree corrected him. "I've built something. There's a difference." He left her office a broken man, shoulders slumped in defeat. Through her floor-to-ceiling windows, Desiree watched him cross the plaza below, a solitary figure against the bustling backdrop of Manhattan. The media frenzy intensified over the following days. Business publications analyzed the brilliant strategy behind the Thornton acquisition, while tabloids feasted on the personal drama. Amber canceled their honeymoon, publicly announcing her need for space to process these shocking revelations about my husband's past. At the twin school, administrators implemented security measures to protect them from overzealous reporters. Desiree and Jason had sat them down the night after the wedding, explaining the situation with age-appropriate honesty. "The man at the wedding, the groom, is your biological father," Desiree had told them gently. "He and I knew each other before you were born." "Why haven't we met him before?" Jaden asked, his analytical mind immediately identifying the logical inconsistency. "He wasn't ready to be a father then," Desiree explained, carefully choosing her words. "He made choices that took him out of our lives." "But Dad is our real dad," Zora stated with certainty, reaching for Jason's hand. "Absolutely," Jason confirmed, squeezing her fingers. "Biology is just science. Family is love, commitment, showing up every day." The twins had processed the information with remarkable maturity, asking thoughtful questions but ultimately reaffirming their connection to Jason. Their resilience brought tears to Desiree's eyes. These remarkable children had inherited her strength along with Maxwell's features. 1 week after the wedding, Maxwell's persistence finally wore down Desiree's resistance. He had called daily, sent emails, even attempted to reach Jason directly. His desperation seemed genuine, and after consultation with her husband and therapist, Desiree agreed to one final meeting. She chose Rosa's restaurant as the location, the place where her rebuilding had begun, where she had found kindness when the world seemed determined to crush her. The restaurant had been closed for the evening to ensure privacy, with only Rosa herself present, insisting on personally serving them for old times' sake. Maxwell arrived punctually, dressed more casually than Desiree had ever seen him, in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The past week had aged him visibly, new lines etched around his eyes, a certain hollowness to his cheeks. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly as Rosa showed him to the table where Desiree waited. "You've been persistent," she replied, neither warm nor cold. Rosa brought water and bread, patting Desiree's shoulder affectionately before retreating to the kitchen with a suspicious glare at Maxwell. "Who is she?" Maxwell asked, noticing the familiar interaction. "Rosa gave me a job and a place to live when I had nothing," Desiree explained. "When you left me pregnant and homeless, she offered kindness without judgment." Maxwell winced. "I've spent the week reading everything I could find about your journey. It's extraordinary what you've accomplished." "It wasn't about accomplishing anything," Desiree corrected him. "It was about surviving, and then ensuring my children would thrive." "Our children," Maxwell said softly. Desiree's expression hardened. "What do you want, Maxwell? You've called incessantly for a week. Here I am." He took a deep breath. "I want a chance to make amends, to know my children, to show them, and you, that I've changed." "Changed?" Desiree repeated skeptically. "Amber has moved out, according to the gossip sites. Your company is no longer yours. You're facing the consequences of your actions for perhaps the first time in your life. That's not change, Maxwell. That's desperation." "I deserve that," he acknowledged. "But please just consider allowing me to meet them properly, to be some small part of their lives." Desiree studied him, searching for sincerity beneath the practiced charm that had once captivated her. "They're not your children, Maxwell. They're Jason's. A father isn't who provides DNA, but who wakes up for midnight fevers, who attends every recital and game, who teaches values and boundaries. You chose not to be that." "I can prove I've changed," he insisted. "Just give me a chance." Desiree smiled serenely. "This isn't about revenge, Maxwell. It's about indifference. You don't mean anything to us. I don't need your money, your name, or your presence in our lives." "And the Thornton hotels?" he asked, a last desperate gambit. "They'll be reformulated, renamed, and integrated into our portfolio," she explained matter-of-factly. "The employees will keep their jobs, will actually improve their benefits. As for you, the board voted unanimously for your removal as CEO." Maxwell's shoulders slumped in defeat. "So that's it? 15 years of my life just erased?" "Perhaps you should try building something yourself this time," Desiree suggested, rising from the table. "Without the family name or inherited fortune, it's surprisingly gratifying." She gathered her purse, leaving him alone at the table that had once been her workplace. Through the window she could see Jason waiting in their car, a solid, dependable presence that stood in stark contrast to the broken man behind her. While Jason, Desiree, Jaden, and Zora inaugurated the new pediatric wing of the Bronx Hospital financed by their family foundation the following week, Maxwell watched the ceremony on television from his new rented apartment, contemplating the empire he had lost and the family he would never know. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel shimmered with hundreds of white orchids and Swarovski crystals, transforming the historic space into a winter wonderland that seemed to exist outside of time. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as waitstaff glided between tables, refilling champagne flutes and serving exquisite canapés. From her position near the entrance, Desiree observed the reception with the critical eye of a perfectionist, noting with satisfaction that every detail had been executed flawlessly. The master of ceremonies tapped his microphone, drawing the attention of the 400 assembled guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with practiced charm, "at the special request of our newlyweds, we have a surprise performance. Please welcome to the stage the CEO of Starlight Enterprises, Mrs. Desiree Williams Johnson." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Maxwell, midway through a sip of champagne, choked audibly. Desiree made her way to the stage with unhurried confidence, her path illuminated by subtle spotlights that seemed to follow her naturally. As she ascended the steps, she removed her tailored blazer, revealing a stunning evening gown beneath, one that highlighted her advanced pregnancy, a detail that had been concealed by her business attire throughout the day. Maxwell's face drained of all color as he registered her silhouette. The whispers around the room grew more insistent, the connections being made in real time as guests alternated between staring at Desiree's pregnant form and Maxwell's ashen face. "This song," Desiree spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and strong, "is dedicated to all the people who have been underestimated in their lives." Her gaze swept the room, momentarily connecting with Maxwell's stricken expression. To those who were told they weren't enough, that they were a mistake, a burden. The band began the opening notes of "I Will Survive," but in a slowed-down arrangement that transformed the disco anthem into something more haunting, more profound. Desiree closed her eyes briefly, then opened them to look directly at Maxwell. "I dedicate this especially to a man who once told me I wasn't worthy of his world," she continued, the room falling into stunned silence. "The same man who doesn't know that while his hotels face bankruptcy, my company is valued at $3.2 billion, 3 times the worth of the Thornton fortune at its peak." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Amber, seated beside Maxwell at the head table, turned to him with widening eyes, the pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. When Desiree began to sing, the room fell under a spell. The powerful voice that had once sung for tips in Rosa's restaurant now filled the grand space with effortless authority. Years of pain, triumph, and hard-won wisdom infused every note, creating a performance that transcended mere entertainment. It was testimony, proclamation, and final verdict all at once. In the audience, Melissa Cambridge, Maxwell's first wife, recognized Desiree instantly, memories flooding back of rumors she'd heard upon returning from Europe years ago. Her eyes widened in understanding as she looked between Desiree and Maxwell, comprehending at last the full story behind their divorce. As the song built to its crescendo, Maxwell seemed to physically shrink in his chair, the weight of 15 years of consequences crushing down upon him. Amber's expression had transformed from confusion to horror to fury, her perfectly manicured hand no longer resting on his arm but clenched in her lap, engagement ring catching the light with every tremor. The final note hung in the air as the ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. Even those who didn't fully understand the subtext recognized they had witnessed something extraordinary. Desiree waited for the applause to subside before speaking again. "And for those wondering who the father is of these twins I'm carrying," she said, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, "it's Jason Williams Johnson, my husband of 10 years and CEO of JWJ Investments." Her eyes found Jason in the crowd, his proud smile warming her. "The man who not only loved me when I had nothing, but who also adopted Jaden and Zora, the children who were rejected and who now run the youth division of the empire we built together." The spotlight found Jason, then shifted to where Jaden and Zora stood near the back of the room, their resemblance to Maxwell unmistakable yet somehow enhanced by the quiet dignity they radiated, a quality their biological father had always lacked. Amber rose abruptly from the head table, tears streaming down her face, ruining the makeup that had taken hours to perfect. Without a word to Maxwell, she rushed from the ballroom, followed immediately by her parents and bridesmaids, leaving her new husband alone at a table set for 12. The reception disintegrated rapidly after that. Guests murmured excuses and departed in clusters. The celebration transformed into something that felt more like a funeral for Maxwell's reputation. By midnight, the lavish space that had been booked until 2 in the morning stood nearly empty, staff clearing plates from abandoned tables while Maxwell sat alone, still in his wedding tuxedo, staring at nothing. The following morning, Desiree awoke to the buzzing of her phone. Headlines screamed across every tabloid and society page. Thornton abandons pregnant girlfriend who becomes billionaire and buys his company. Wedding nightmare. Bride flees after shocking revelation. Revenge served ice cold. Billionaire reveals secret past at ex's wedding. "Are you satisfied?" Jason asked, bringing her tea in bed, his expression neither judgmental nor approving, simply curious. Desiree considered the question seriously. "Not satisfied," she finally answered. "Complete. Like a circle that needed to be closed has finally found its endpoint." Over the next week, Maxwell made increasingly desperate attempts to contact Desiree. Bouquets arrived at her office hourly, each returned unopened. His emails went unanswered, his calls redirected to voicemail. When he appeared unannounced at Starlight headquarters, security politely but firmly escorted him out. On day 7, a delivery arrived at their home, a small worn box containing the ultrasound image of the twins that Maxwell had tossed aside that snowy night 15 years earlier. Attached was a handwritten note. "I kept this. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me always knew I'd made the worst mistake of my life." It was this gesture, not the flowers or desperate messages, that finally moved Desiree to agree to one last meeting. She suggested Rosa's restaurant, now closed on Mondays, but opened specially for this occasion. The restaurant had changed over the years, expanded, renovated, yet still maintaining the warm authenticity that had made it a neighborhood staple. Rosa herself, now in her 70s but still sharp-eyed and protective, insisted on being present. "If he says one wrong word to you," she muttered while setting the table, "I still have my rolling pin." Maxwell arrived precisely on time, the Burberry coat and designer suit replaced by simple jeans and a button-down shirt. The past week had aged him visibly, new lines etched around his eyes, hair showing streaks of gray that hadn't been there before, shoulders rounded with the weight of public humiliation. "Thank you for seeing me," he said quietly as he sat across from Desiree. "I almost didn't," she replied honestly. "What do you want, Maxwell?" "To apologize," he began, then shook his head. "No, that's not enough. To beg forgiveness? To make amends? I don't know if there are words for what I need to do." "There aren't," Desiree confirmed. "Some wounds don't heal with words." Maxwell nodded, accepting this truth. "I made the greatest mistake of my life," he confessed, his voice breaking. "Please, let me try to compensate in some way. Let me meet my children, properly meet them." "They aren't your children, Maxwell," Desiree said, her voice gentle but firm. "They're Jason's. A father isn't who provides DNA, but who wakes up in the middle of the night for fevers, who attends every recital and game, who teaches values and boundaries. You chose not to be that." "But I've changed," he insisted, leaning forward. "I can prove it." Desiree studied him thoughtfully. "Have you? Or are you simply facing the consequences of your actions for the first time? Amber has filed for annulment according to this morning's news. Your reputation is in tatters. Your company belongs to someone else. This feels less like change and more like desperation." Maxwell had no answer for this, his gaze dropping to the table. "What about the Thornton hotels?" he finally asked, voice small. "They'll be reformulated, renamed and integrated into our portfolio," Desiree explained matter-of-factly. "The employees will keep their jobs. We'll actually improve their benefits and working conditions. As for you, the board voted unanimously for your removal as CEO." The finality of her words hung between them. Maxwell looked physically ill, confronting a future without the family name, fortune, or status that had defined his entire existence. "Maybe you should try building something yourself this time," Desiree suggested, not unkindly. "Without the family name or inherited wealth, it's surprisingly gratifying." As she stood to leave, Maxwell asked one final question. "Is this about revenge, Desiree? Have you spent 15 years planning my downfall?" Desiree smiled, a genuine expression free from malice. "No, Maxwell. It's about indifference. You don't mean anything to us anymore. I don't need your money, your name, or your presence in our lives. My revenge, if you want to call it that, was simply building a life so magnificent that your rejection became irrelevant." The following week, the Williams-Johnson family appeared at the opening of a new pediatric wing at Bronx General Hospital, funded entirely by their family foundation. Photographs of the event showed Desiree and Jason cutting the ribbon, flanked by Jaden and Zora, all four radiating the special glow of people secure in their purpose and place in the world. In his rented one-bedroom apartment on the Upper East Side, Maxwell watched the ceremony on television, nursing a glass of scotch as he contemplated the empire he had lost and the family he would never know. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who had once declared Desiree not enough for his world now found himself excluded from the far more significant one she had built. In the Starlight office, displayed prominently on Desiree's desk, a simple frame contained the ultrasound image of her new twins, positioned beside the older yellowed one, a reminder not of what she had lost, but of how much she had gained. Her revenge wasn't humiliating Maxwell, but simply proving that she had always been far more than he could ever measure. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen